What's up, guys? Ron from Ronald Rohde Law here. And in this video, we're going to be sitting down with George Pino, who is a broker in Los Angeles. He has built with his partner, Joe, just an incredible powerhouse of a real estate brokerage. And what we're going to talk about is the early developments of if you're a commercial real estate broker or an agent. George, welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ron. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting time in the market, and we were just chatting beforehand. But what is your background, I guess, in the recessions or slow periods? It's weird. I don't want to call it a recession, but we're seeing a decrease in volume. That is a fact. That's all great, and all of those are steps that people could be doing now in the recession. To whether it's a short recession, and then you have less time, but it sounds there's a lot of action steps, and if people are already doing that to some degree, they should be using their free time to be 90% business development. And I think the issue was the last couple of years they didn't have to, and so they don't know how to spend their free time. You can't just double somebody's free time and say, okay, now do this. They're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
These are some great tips. What kind of I guess career path, or can you talk a little bit more about what the differences or recommendations between, say, like tenant rep or investment sales or leasing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to break it down in two phases here. I mean, you have both the kind of boutique firms as well as you have the large nationals or international firms. And it really is it's different in different aspects, in that a large firm is really good for the type of person that likes to, understands that they need more than just guidance. They need to be told what to do.
Okay.
This is your job. You're going to do this for 6 hours. You're going to do this for 2 hours. You're going to do this, and just repeat, rinse and repeat. Keep doing it over and over and over. That's really great for if that's your personality. That's really great for a lot of the larger companies that have a lot more of a corporate structure. The CBREs, the JLLs, Avs & Youngs, where you have different options that you can go into the corporate structure, put your dues in, and work your way up. It may take 10, 15 years until you're at a senior level, but then the payoff tends to be there. Boutique firms are typically more for the entrepreneurial spirit, that, the can-do attitude, not the, I don't need excuses. I'm going to find a way around it. I'm going to either find a way around it or through it. I'm going to get it done. And with that in mind, that's where we're seeing a lot of the innovations that are coming about, because the boutique firms don't have that corporate structure that they have to run it through, make sure it's okay, make sure it's going to be okay for 50 states as well legally, that they're in compliance. If they allow one agent to do that here in Florida, are they going to allow the same agent to do, or another agent to do that in California? So that is there. The issue with boutique firms typically are they don't have a national reach. That being said, in this market, and one of the things, and we talked about this a little bit, like, when do you do this planning? During COVID, we realized that we were bringing a lot of international companies into the Southern California market, and they loved us in the Southern California market. We were expanding them, growing them. This is pre-COVID, but whenever they expanded outside the Southern California market, they wanted to go elsewhere. To another company, because we're honest, and frankly, can't blame them, because we weren't able to service them. You need boots on the ground especially when you're doing tenant rep stuff. And so we, during COVID, thought, I'm tired of losing these clients. So Joe, my business partner, he ended up creating what we call our affiliate network. It's a little bit more than just a referral network. It's more of an affiliate network that we have an understanding. We actually help each other out, meaning I had a client that I was pitching, and they were looking at expanding multiple expansion in multiple states and cities, primarily Chicago, New York, Miami, and LA. And I needed to get all the demos and all the traffic and what's the best areas. Here's who their demographic is. Where do you recommend that they open their brick and mortar locations? Literally within a week, I had all that data coming in from all those cities. So I was able to put together a really nice presentation and get the account. We also, and from there, we started bringing in, we have the other clients that are coming in, and I have one agent that's doing a deal now in DC, New York, Miami, and they just closed the one in LA through our affiliate network. So it's that planning stage ahead of time. Now with agents, if they're trying to choose a career path, number one, I'm always been, this is what I've told my kids, and they're not in commercial real estate, but find something that you really love doing and do it. And then that way you're never really working a day in your life. Like you said, commercial real estate can be fun. Not too many people say that unless they're actually doing it. I love it. I mean, it's a blast. I love making deals. I love being able to help clients, figure out that puzzle piece. Like, okay, here's what they're trying to accomplish. Can I do that for them? And I love doing that. So, for me, I was lucky to fall into it. I didn't really actually give it much thought, but newer agents, we always tell them, think about it. If you're going to go into a tenant, first of all, choose, retail, office, multifamily, investment sales, retail investment sales. What do you want to do? What do you feel comfortable with? Take the money component out of it, because ultimately, if you do well, the money's going to follow. If you do what you're doing and you like what you're doing, you're going to do well and the money will follow. So take the money component out of there. Don't say, because a lot of agents come in saying, oh, I want to do retail investment sales because there's a big money in there. Well, not necessarily. Our biggest commission to date was a lease.
Really? That's interesting.
A 7-figure commission on a lease. Yes. So, and now it was on Rodeo and for an ad firm, and we did set the record, I think, at the time for rent for Rodeo. But at the same time, agents, if they really focus on what they, a lot of people come in like, I love retail. It's great. I love seeing how it works. I can see what it
retail's sexy and
it's sexy,
and you can say clients that people know, but man, it's tough.
Surprisingly, industrial, right now there's been a lot of work and news in the news about industrial and just getting the whole distribution network itself. They now have degrees in that. So, but what's interesting is that we're actually seeing industrial, which was historically predominantly 99% male, older males working it. Now we're seeing a lot of women going into it because they're understanding. And frankly, I mean, I think women are a lot more organized. I see what my wife does and give her kudos and props. I think they're a lot more organized than most men I know. So I can understand that they can really pick up the whole logistics concept and aspect and understand what people need. And they're killing it. I mean, people I know around the country in the Nashville market, in San Diego, up in Northern California, the women there are just killing it, especially the ones that are going into the industrial side. And it's good to see that because I think they're bringing a refreshing new kind of look as opposed to the old, standard. And so we're seeing that. So, as an agent coming in, understand what you're passionate about and kind of go after that. A lot of people I know love tenant rep. And the tenant rep is interesting, and a lot of people don't even understand when they're first coming into commercial real estate. They're agents that all they do is represent tenants. Yes, there's actually companies that's all they do is represent a tenant. And that could be a really good, I liken it a little bit to insurance because it almost becomes an annuity in the sense that if I do a lease for a tenant, as long as I stay in contact with them in 3 to 5 years, they're going to have to renew. I can then help them renew. And now it's one less deal I have to chase after. After about 10, 15 years, hopefully I have, 10, 15 clients renewing every year kind of thing. So yeah, I no longer have to chase the business. It can be really good at that. It can also be really good because you're really understanding the market and bringing value to that tenant. A lot of people think that they can negotiate a better deal than the agents. I disagree. I mean, we get calls all the time about, my landlord's asking me for this and they want me to renew. What should I do? And would you just write a counter LOI for me for a fee? I'm like, no, that's not what I do. Hire an attorney. It's a lot cheaper. In that instance, it would be.
Right.
So we ended up coming in and explaining, but, I took the time because I'm always about adding value. I'm not going to dismiss someone even if I can't help them on a personal level on working. I'm going to try and give them advice and help them out. So, I was explaining to this tenant who originally told me, I don't really need much help negotiating this lease. other than how I should probably kind of respond with the market conditions. Like, is this a fair rental rate? That's kind of what I'm looking for. And I sat there and I said, well, is it giving you any concessions? Are you giving any free rent? Yeah, well, no, this is a renewal. Why would he? I said, because if you move, he's going to have to give that to a new tenant. He's going to have to pay a commission to a new tenant, to a full commission to to brokers if you move out. In addition to that, he's probably going to give 2, 3, 4 months of rent concessions, free rent for them to build out and change the space to what you want. And
although a lot of those tenants come to you about 2 months before the renewal, 3 months before the renewal, I'm like, well, now I can't threaten to leave because it just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Be like, oh yeah, well, I will move out. So.
But surprisingly, and this was a gentleman who said, I've been redoing my leases for the last, I think it was 20 years. And he goes, I know what I'm doing. Okay. And yet he had never gotten any of these concessions before or anything else. And I know I can do that. I mean, we can, typically speaking, landlords are business people.
Yeah.
And
that's fair. I represent a lot of landlords. We do a lot of leasing. So,
and it's all a business decision. So especially if you're coming in a position of strength where you do have time to look, I always tell people you want to start looking for a new space, even if when your lease is coming up, start looking for a new space, even if you're not necessarily going to move a year or so in advance.
Yeah.
And, and even if you're larger companies, even more so. I mean, it's very difficult to move a 15,000 square foot office space, in 6 months. You have build out, you have other issues, negotiating, finding. So really a year and a half for those larger companies. So it's interesting though, in that a lot of people, and frankly, I've even had attorneys, not real estate attorneys, come back and say, oh, I negotiate these. I've done all my leases. I'm like, okay, let's go. If you want to take the other side, I'm happy to negotiate against you, because I'm coming to them with a lot more current market knowledge. Of the trends and what landlords are offering and what's happening, because this is what I'm doing every single day. And not just myself, but I got 14 agents out here that are doing this as well, and we're all sharing information. I mean, I have a database of all of our deals, who gave what, how much did they give, where. So I can go in and say, yeah, here's your ask rate, but here's the last deal we cut, and it was only 2 months ago. This is where I think we can get you. And so, we have this database. Average person or attorney doesn't have that.
For sure.
So,
and that's my disclaimer. I would say a lot of people come to me and say, oh, we've already agreed on all the terms. We just want you to write it up. And then they'll start asking me like, oh, do you think that's a fair thing? Do you think that's a fair whatever? And I have to qualify them. Look, I can write up everything that you want and I'll save you all that commission. But I do not advise on numbers. Numbers are your domain, and the length of the lease term and a guarantee and all this. It is so much specialized knowledge that if you as a client have any hesitation that I am not 100% on top of this, George, I have a real estate market person in my company that their job is your job. They don't even have this conversation. But if you're having the conversation, it's because you have doubt in the back of your head. And that's what I think agents need to not prey on, but they need to latch onto that, because that fact that they have that doubt is the reason they should hire you.
Absolutely.
And so it's really interesting. I think, those are sales. Those are possible clients. You just have to close the deal. And
it's funny you say that, because I say the exact opposite when I talk to clients, because they always ask me, well, what do you think about this term in the PSA or this and that? And I'm always, you know what? I can advise you on maybe some areas that you're going to want your attorney to look at, but I'm not going to give you any legal language advice.
Yeah.
And, although I could probably get away with some of it, after 35 years doing it, going back and forth, and, I can probably get away with some of it, but I'm never taking that step. Just like you could, with all your transactions and everything you do, you can still advise, but at the same time, that's really not what they're hiring you for.
That's
and,
right.
That's something I want to, like a lot of younger agents, they don't understand that. They're always, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with saying, that's really something that I can't help you with, but I have someone who can. That's why I talk about going back, making sure your team is all in place. What the things that you can't do. And in some states, especially like California, where we're at, they can take a very hardline stance if I start giving what they consider legal advice.
Well, what about drafting addendums? I mean, I see that a lot. And my internal rule that I tell my staff and my team is like, I give brokers about 6 words. If you guys draft addendums or little changes, if it doesn't exceed 6 words where it says, the seller will do X, I'm like, okay, I give you the limit. But when they start saying they're going to remove this piece of art, and put it for auction, in the event it doesn't sell, then they'll convey with the sale. But if they get this, then there'll be a purchase price. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You cannot draft that much legal language because it is ambiguous and impossible to enforce. So I give them 6 words. And, for somebody like you, maybe you get 12. But there's a limit.
What's interesting, and I try not to do any of that myself. I mean, and if I do, I'm sending it to their attorney just to save them time to get it done and saying, here's the red line, here's what changes I made. Here, you do you. But, ultimately, when it comes down to that, I think you're absolutely right. And, agents don't understand, the layman they don't understand that, just changing one word or adding one word can change the whole context of that.
Yep.
And there are certain legal qualifying words, whether it's commercially reasonable versus reasonable, which is not really a qualifier. So there's certain things that we can catch, and that, I've been lucky enough, like I said, be in the business long enough and enough transactions to kind of see that stuff, but I'm not going to step out and do, like, hey, you need to change that. You need that, because now I'm giving legal advice, and that's not what I do. But at the same time, I'm still going to look at it, and I do still do review. And when I do review, like leases or purchase and sale agreements, I'm always telling them I'm reviewing them for the terms to make sure that the terms that we negotiated are all in there. Now, the exact language, though, is going to be up to your attorney and yourself to kind of negotiate out. But the terms are the terms. And then when I get pushback from attorneys like trying to change the terms, I usually come back with, that's market, and this is what's been negotiated. We went back around over and over, and I understand that you're trying to help the client out, but they're asking you for legal advice, not for sales advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we've covered it, right? We've talked about new agent, invest in yourself, not just the company, picking up, I don't say secondary, but it's almost like a major focus and a backup. But those should be kind of your 2 focus, where one is your short term. But if that short term focus is declining, you have your backup that's already pre-prepared, because it's foreseeable, really. You can't have golden days forever. And so, like your office guy, he should have had a backup. He should have been saying, like, I'm really specialized downtown office tenant rep, but what's my backup? And
absolutely.
And maybe these are marketing things for 2023. You've got to use the technology. You've got to use different ways of BD and outreach. What else, I guess, do you want to say is kind of a final words of wisdom for somebody who's either a new agent, new real estate? How do you get through this?
Education. I think that's where people fall off, especially younger agents. They're hungry for education and knowledge, but as they get older, they don't put that investment back into it. And, if you can give advice to your clients and back it up with actual knowledge, doesn't matter if you're a young agent or a newer agent, know everything that you can about that market, read the newspapers, read the industry magazines, but also take it, take it with a grain of salt, in the sense of, use your logic. I mean, most agents are smart, but at least they have common sense, right? And people can usually figure out, there's all these analogies and old sayings, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, things like that. So use your common sense and understand that, like, if this is the news here, well, how can I, as a commercial real estate agent, take advantage of it? It could be something as simple, and this goes back to, I sat in on a office meeting for a residential firm once, and the owner of the firm was actually speaking, and he said, how many of you read the LA Business Journal? And not one of the residential agents raised their hands. I'm like, yeah, it's my Bible. Yeah. And this was way back in the day before, they weren't online or anything. And, you know, he sat there and he looked at it and he starts going. And what was great about the LA Business Journal is that, you know, they typically break business news 2 to 3 weeks ahead of like the LA Times or the local magazines, because that's not their readership, or the LA Times, it's not their readership, but it is for the LA Business Journal. So we would have this information about companies expanding or companies moving. And, you know, he said, and he was like, well, how many of you know about this company moving in? And they're like, none of them. You know, well, what does a company need to move?
New houses for their employees.
Bingo. And so for on the residential side, but that was connecting the dots.
Right.
And a lot of agents don't take that step. You know, they read the news, they regurgitate it instead of digesting it. You know, and you want to digest the news, seeing how it's going to affect you, your business, and your client and their business. And that's how you can add value and stand apart from the crowd, and you'll always get clients back. I mean, the best compliment I ever got was a client who I'd sold 4 office buildings to, and we became friends. And he called me up one day and said, George, I got to tell you, you are the worst salesman I've ever met. And I sat there and I was like, okay, I'll bite.
Why?
What do you mean? He goes, well, you've talked me out of buying more properties than you will ever sell me in your lifetime. And I said, yes, you're right. But that's also why you're going to call me for the rest of your life whenever you need real estate. And his response was, yeah, you're right. So, I mean, I get that. Don't be salesman-y. Just give the facts, give the education. The deals will come through.
That's great. Yeah, that's good words. If people are feeling pessimistic in this market right now, again, want to thank George for being on the channel. I guess that. Well, thanks for being on the channel. Smash that like button, subscribe for more commercial real estate tips, and we'll see you next time.